Hi guys, in this video we're going to discuss the 5 reasons why Trump will lose the election, probably, and 2 takeaways from this. Last time I made a video entitled, Why Joe Biden Will Lose the Election, discussing Biden's weaknesses. So this time I thought I would do one for Trump. It's no secret that Trump is tanking in the polls in the wake of the social unrest caused by the murder of George Floyd. 17 million are unemployed, 132,000 dead, the country is on fire, and Trump is panicking. Look, I know it's early to make this kind of video. This is not a prediction, but it's an analysis of where Trump's weaknesses are. He could still win in November, but if he doesn't, this will be the reason why. Number 1 is Trump's response to the anti-police brutality protests. Americans don't have trust in Trump's ability to handle race relations. In fact, just 38% of people trust Trump to be able to handle justice and racial equality. Compare this to 51% who trust Joe Biden and 60% who trust the Black Lives Matter movement more than Trump to handle racism. And this stems from Trump's handling of the situation. While the country was divided by race riots, rather than calling for unity, Trump doubled down on division and authoritarian tactics. Case in point is when people were peacefully protesting in Washington, D.C. Trump had the peaceful protesters tear-gassed and beaten up in order to make way for a photo op in front of a church with the Bible in his hand. But rather than appealing to his evangelical Christian base, the move backfired. 2/3 of Americans, 63%, opposed Trump's move to forcefully clear protesters, and 9 out of 10 Americans support the right to protest peacefully in front of the White House. Even prominent conservative pastors like Pat Robertson criticized Trump for using the Bible as a prop. This combination of protests, sour race relations, the pandemic, and economic crisis have resulted in 80% of Americans feeling the country is out of control. That's never a good sign for a president. People feel the country is headed in the wrong direction. Yet rather than acting as the uniter-in-chief, Trump has only made increased appeals to so-called law and order rather than justice. In a time of crisis like this, people increasingly see Joe Biden as a steady hand. People don't want a populist bomb thrower like they did in 2016, but steady leadership and stability. By failing to act as a calming and uniting force in the country, Trump has shot himself in the foot. And if things don't change, he will pay for it in November. Number 2 is the economy. The economy is imploding, with over 17 million unemployed and GDP collapsing. Yet amidst this crisis, Trump is still touting economic numbers from before the crisis.
Don't forget, before the China plague came in, and it's a China plague, before that came in, we had the best job numbers we've ever had. We had the best economy we've ever had. We had the best stock market we've ever had, which, by the way, is getting very close to those numbers anyway. And in NASDAQ, it's actually beat those numbers.
This shows how out of touch he is. You don't get a free pass just because there's a crisis. As president, it's your job to deal with the crisis, and Trump has failed. The fact that there's a crisis is not Trump's fault, but the response to it is. The Trump administration could have pushed to subsidize wages and therefore avoid the spike in unemployment like they did in many European countries. But instead, they bailed out the largest corporations and left Americans with a $1,200 stimulus check, far from adequate. Every incumbent president facing a recession in the lead-up to a re-election has lost, and as things stand, Trump could suffer the same. But there's more nuance to this issue than it seems. You see, although Trump is not trusted to handle coronavirus, the protests, or race relations, a majority, 56%, still trust Trump to handle the economy. This is his strongest issue in the minds of voters. On top of that, the latest figures show somewhat of a recovery, with 4.8 million jobs recovered in the month of June, bringing the unemployment rate down to 11.1%. All in all, 1/3 of jobs lost during the corona crisis have been recovered. Now, this still falls far short of what is needed, and it doesn't mean that this is a result of Trump's policies. In fact, the opposite may be true. But if Trump can spin these numbers to make it seem like he's responsible for an economic recovery, he could still win. On top of that, the closer we get to November, the more likely it is that there is some economic recovery. However, with a second wave of coronavirus erupting in some states, or more accurately, a first wave that never ended, the economic recovery could be slower. Many states have been forced to close again, and consumer spending is back down. You see, Trump's mistake is this. He wants to regain momentum in the polls by reopening the economy, but by reopening too early, he puts people in danger, which undermines the confidence necessary to have an economic recovery in the first place. Trump can keep calling for reopening, but as long as people don't feel safe enough to go out and economically secure enough to start spending money, the economy won't recover, and so Trump is sabotaging himself and will pay the price if he doesn't change. Number 3 is coronavirus. With 2.9 million infections and 132,000 dead, Trump's response to the coronavirus has been totally out of touch. And this was exemplified by Trump's decision to hold his first rally to kick off his 2020 campaign in Oklahoma, even as coronavirus is surging across the country. Trump predicted that up to 1 million people would show up to his rally, yet only 6,000 people showed up, with images of an empty stadium being broadcast nationwide. And in a twist of fate, Republican Herman Cain contracted coronavirus at the rally. And in the embarrassment that followed, Trump walked away from the rally looking defeated. Even Trump realized that he's losing, and he admitted it himself, saying,
And he's going to be your president because some people don't love me, maybe.
And all this shows in the numbers. The American people disapprove of Trump's handling of the coronavirus by 57% to 40%. And while Trump wants to begin reopening and holding rallies, the majority of the American people don't. 56% believe the country is reopening too quickly compared to just 15% who think it's not reopening fast enough. And the results show in the polling. Joe Biden is leading by double digits, not just nationally, but also in the swing states where Biden is leading by 9, 10, 11 points in some states. But even while the country is in a healthcare crisis, Republicans are trying to abolish Obamacare in the Supreme Court, which would push 23 million people off of health insurance in the middle of a pandemic. Actions like this will lose Trump the election. Number 4 is Trump's strategy, or lack thereof. America is in crisis, yet Trump has no new policies. In a Fox News interview, he couldn't name what policies he will implement going forward.
What are your top priority items for a second term?
Well, one of the things that will be really great, the word experience is still good. I always say talent is more important than experience. I've always said that. But the word experience is a very important word. It's a very important meaning.
In 2016, Trump was able to tap into a deep sense of frustration with the political establishment. He was able to tap into fears about immigration and outsourcing of jobs by promising to build a wall and take on China. But this time, he's got nothing. While people are suffering, Trump is trying to ignite anger over cultural issues like taking down statues. That could have worked in 2016. But today, people have more pressing issues on their plate. And this shows in Google search data, which shows much more interest for coronavirus than for statues, police, or Antifa. Over 20 million Americans are in danger of eviction because they can't afford to pay rent. Yet Trump is talking about statues. This only serves to make him seem out of touch with the average American. Trump's unique appeal in 2016 was that he was fighting for the common man against out-of-touch elites like Hillary Clinton. But now he is an out-of-touch elite. His other big strategy is fear-mongering about the radical left. And this is ridiculous when you think about it. Trump is trying to paint moderate Democrat Joe Biden as somehow controlled by the radical left. I wish he was controlled by the radical left. The fact is that Joe Biden has spent a career promoting policies opposed by the radical left, and he spent an entire primary election season arguing against the left-wing policies of Bernie Sanders. Painting him as somehow part of the radical left will be about as convincing as calling Obama a socialist. In fact, Trump's name-calling hasn't worked on Joe Biden the way it worked on Hillary. Look at this graph. Around this time in 2016, Trump's name-calling led to a massive spike in Google searches for Crooked Hillary. Yet in 2020, Google searches for Sleepy Joe are minimal. Unless Trump can come up with a clear message for 2020 and concrete policies to meet people's immediate needs, they will vote for change. Number 5 is demographics. In order to build a winning coalition, Trump needs the right demographic groups to support him. But key demographic groups that supported Trump in 2016 are switching their allegiance to Joe Biden. Looking just at the swing states, old people, those over 65, voted for Trump by a 13-point margin in 2016. But now, Biden is leading among older voters in the swing states by 6 points. And remember, in most elections, old people vote Republican. Even Trump's core demographic of whites without a college degree are abandoning him. In 2016, in the swing states, he won this group by 26 points, but now he's only leading by 16 points. The military is another group who supported Trump by 54% back in 2016. But ever since the revelation that Trump knew that Russians were offering bounties to kill American troops in Afghanistan, more and more members of the military and war veterans are turning away from Trump. Even among his own Republican Party, just a few months ago, 55% were satisfied with the direction of the country. That number has now collapsed to just 19% of Republicans satisfied with the direction of the country. Trump is polling lower than every president at this point in his presidency except Bush Sr. and Jimmy Carter, who both lost their re-election. Now you might say, Hillary Clinton was also leading in the polls at this point, and she still lost. But it's just not the same this time around. At this point in the race, Hillary Clinton was leading by 4 points, yet Joe Biden is leading by double that, 8.8 points in the average of polls. The percentage of people who see Trump and Biden as very favorable is the same at 27% and 26% each. But the percentage who view Trump as very unfavorable is much higher at 50% compared to just 27% who see Biden as very unfavorable. It's not that Joe Biden is a good candidate or that people even like him. They just hate Trump more. And that's an exact reversal of 2016, where people hated Trump, but they hated Hillary Clinton even more. And so people will vote for the candidate they hate least, which is Joe Biden. This spells doom for Trump. Now there are 2 takeaways from this. Number 1, it's almost sad to see that Joe Biden is the Democratic candidate. You see, the Democrats' overwhelming lead over Trump is not because Joe Biden is a spectacular candidate. Any Democrat would do, and any Democrat would be leading Trump at this point. America is now in a place of reckoning. Every systemic problem in the United States has been unraveled by this crisis, whether it's the ludicrous healthcare system, the corporate bailouts, or the corrupt and racist criminal justice system. America is hungry for change, and this would be the perfect moment for a change-style leader like Bernie Sanders to implement the necessary changes. Democrats will likely win big in November, yet all this political capital will be wasted by someone like Joe Biden, who wants to maintain the status quo rather than bringing about sweeping changes. It really makes you wonder how history could have been different. Number 2, don't be complacent. The Economist is predicting that Joe Biden has a 9 in 10 chance of winning the election. But let's not forget that in 2016, Hillary Clinton was predicted to have a 95% chance of winning the election. We should not allow these positive results to lull us into a false sense of security and end up being a self-fulfilling prophecy. If everyone stays at home because they think Trump will lose anyway, then Trump will win. If you are American, there is only one way to get rid of Trump, and that is to vote. And if we are to defeat not just Trump, but Trumpism, he must not just be defeated, but he must lose in a landslide. A lot could change between now and November. I don't know if Trump will lose, but if he does, this will be the reason why. Check out my last video on how Joe Biden could lose the election. Thank you to my Patreons who made this video possible. Like, share, and subscribe, because this was my take.